All right. Are we letting folks in? Hello, everybody. Just going to give it a minute here to let everybody in. I think we got people popping in. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Hello.
Good morning.
Welcome to February 2025 and Black History Month. We're so excited to be here today, and we're excited that you are here with us and looking forward to this discussion today about how to leverage the power of employee resource groups. We had so many wonderful folks step up and say that they were excited to talk about employee resource groups, that we had a really hard time narrowing down the panelists. So we didn't. We just expanded it, and we're really excited about being able to offer so many different perspectives today about how we can really leverage this power of bringing people together for a common interest in an effort to do good in the world. My name is Jessica Miller, and I'm the Director of Workforce Strategy for the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. And again, we're really happy that you're here with us today. If you're new, thank you so much for joining us. And if you're returning, thank you for coming back again. Our team of consultants work regionally, which means that every consultant has a slightly different way of doing their work based off of the region and the employers that they're serving in those regions. But the common core ways that we serve our employers and our regions are identified here on this slide. We work with you to identify gaps in your current strategies and ensure that you're connected with your local, regional, and state workforce partners. And then we assist you in building strategies that will help you attract and retain workforce. You can pop to the next slide. Our consultation process is rooted and informed in data, and it's developed specifically with your company's needs and goals in mind. And we serve as your guide throughout this process and convene workforce partners for support, for sharing great training grant opportunities, and continually check in to ensure that progress is being made the way that you want it to be made along the way. When you work with us, you are automatically connected to a wide network of people and partners who work collaboratively for the success of our state, our regions, our communities, so that your business and our workforce can thrive. We do not do this work alone, and it takes many people to bring success to these efforts. You pop to the next slide. You'll see here we have our 2025 lineup available for registration. You spoke and we listened, and we incorporated your feedback into these topics, and we'll continue to weave your needs into our sessions for the rest of the year. I would also like to take a moment to encourage you to fill out the evaluation at the end of our time here together, and we'll get that link popped in the chat for you. As always, these webinars are recorded and available to view at any time via YouTube, as well as our CareerForceMN.com website, where you'll also find recordings and resources from this session, as well as all of the previous sessions. And there's a lot of gold in those sessions. We'll be utilizing our chat feature today as you are all digging in right away. So if you haven't already, please introduce yourselves, ask questions, interact with our guests, our consultants, our partners, and each other. And we really want to build on the community that we've started here, and we welcome your engagement always, always. We have a super packed agenda today with speakers, as you can see here, who have dedicated their careers to being change makers and culture shakers. And I am just really so excited for you to meet them. So without further ado, it's my privilege and honor to introduce you to our Metro-based workforce strategy consultant, the amazing Adeshewa Adesiji, who will be leading the session today. Adeshewa.
Thank you so much, Jessica. So thank you to everyone, panelists, people in the audience, my coworkers. I am so excited about this particular webinar. One, because it's in February, so happy Black History Month again. And two, it really does address one of the key things in my line of work, or what makes me really passionate about this work, and it's diversity, it's equity, it's inclusion. I know that in this climate, those seem to be bad words or a bad acronym, but that will never be anything negative to me ever. So Today, the webinar is going to be focused on employee resource groups in today's workplace. And so as Jessica mentioned, we wanted to do it a little bit different. If you have attended previous webinars, usually we speak for an hour. We have the first hour would include our presentation, our panel discussion, and then we would have the last 30 minutes of what we call unplugged. As Jessica mentioned, there was an overwhelming number of people interested in this particular webinar, and so we decided to do it a little different. We decided to have two panels and have this webinar be a little bit longer. So as you can see, this is the agenda that we have for today. I always like to start with just everyone having the same understanding of what the topic is. So in this case, what is an employee resource group? We talk about the many names for ERGs, the four foundations or the four C's of ERGs, myths and facts about ERGs, being an effective ERG ally, that's very important. Steps for starting an ERG for those in the audience that are on the fence but don't know how to actually start one. Just talk a little bit about that. And then we have two panels. The first panel will focus on why ERGs are important or necessary and essential. And then panel two will talk about best practices for implementing and sustaining an ERG at your organization. Between the panels, we'll do a quick audience check-in where my colleagues, Della Ludwig and James Rowan Soldier will ask some questions or see if the audience wants to ask one or two questions before we go into the second panel. And then we'll have some takeaways, and then we'll have a larger Q&A session. So like I said, this is the first time that we're changing up the agenda and just how the webinar will go. So hopefully not only is this successful, but this will be incorporated into future webinars. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. So as I mentioned, I think it's important before we get into the topic is that everyone has that same understanding of what an ERG is. So I know most of us, especially the panelists, know what an ERG is, but for those in the audience who are not aware of what an ERG is, an ERG is an employee resource group, or ERG or employee resource group is a voluntary group within a company formed by employees who share a common identity or interest, like gender, ethnicity, or veteran status, with the goal of creating a supportive community, promoting inclusion, and providing professional development opportunities for its members within the organization. So usually there's three key points about ERGs. First, they're employee-led. Second, they do focus on diversity and inclusion, and they help with professional development. So as you can see, one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to list commonly known ERGs and then non-traditional ERGs. I think right now there's this misconception that ERGs are only for race, ethnicity, gender identity, and sexual orientation. But as you can see, and through my research, there are many different types of ERGs. So if you look at the commonly known ERGs, in addition to the ones that I just mentioned, veteran military families, working parents, and caregivers. But if you look at non-traditional ERGs, there can be ERGs based on age or generations. So a lot of baby boomers, if they want, feeling that they're about to exit the workforce, if they wanted to create an ERGs for Generation X, what have you. You have non-traditional roles. So, for example, women in manufacturing or men in nursing. That would be an example of a non-traditional ERG. A young professional network. We have industry-based as well. So once again, that goes to maybe women in technology, women in manufacturing, men in nursing, those type of things. We have ERGs based on mental health. ERGs can be for child-free people. And, ERGs could be for fur babies. So if you have, enough people at your work that have pets that consider them as their children, that could be an ERG too. So what I'm trying to get at is, we need to get out of this mindset that ERGs are just based, once again, on race, ethnicity, gender, identity, sexual orientation. As I mentioned, this is a group for people or employees that have some similarities to come together. Outside of your personal life, the majority of your hours within your day is spent in a work setting. And so, people want to connect with people that maybe think like them, have, different similar things to them, such as, being pets or having pets, not having children, things like that. So, you know, just to think that, ERGs are just not for, like I said, race, ethnicity, gender identity, or sexual orientations. There's many different ERGs that can be developed. So, ERGs by many names. There are many different groups that work similar or work the same as ERG groups. For those in the audience that are looking to create an employee resource group, you don't necessarily have to call it an employee resource group. So as you can see, there are different names that employers have used in the past um, to call, a group that does the same, has the same goals and mission and vision as an employee resource group. So the reason why I wanted to include this is also to let the audience know and let employers know in the audience that are on the fence about putting together ERG groups is you don't have to call it an ERG group. You can call it a diversity group. You can call it a people's group. You can call it an affinity group. There might be some differences, slight differences, but at the end, the goal of that group is the same. So here are the four foundations of ERGs. So the four C's, as I would call them, were introduced in 2006 by Dr. Robert Rodriguez of DRR Advisors LLC. So the 4C assessment model allows companies to benchmark their ERGs against a normative database, scores of over 150 other corporations. So, what Robert did, or Mr. Rodriguez did, is said, okay, here are the four foundations. Here's the four C's of an ERG. This is when companies are putting together ERGs with it. This is what they should think of. They should think of the culture. They should think of community. They should think of, and I have culture twice, career, and then commerce. So these are basically the four foundations. And we'll have this changed up before we upload it to our webpage. But these are basically the four foundations of an ERG. So why have an ERG? Well, my question to you is why not? ERGs can boost employee morale and allow employees to connect with like-minded individuals. Remember, this goes beyond race, ethnicity, gender identity. Promoting that connection can benefit the company at large. So, this type of connection, helps to engage and motivate employees to take more care of their work, their relationship, and their productivity. So why have an ERG? Well, you're providing a platform for group members to share concerns, connecting group members with mentors and organizational support. ERGs can help spread awareness of how certain identity intersect with workplace issues. Increasing cultural awareness among staff, which is very important. Helping all employees feel accepted and valued. Fostering better relationships between new and existing employees. And then providing professional development opportunities. These are just a small list, um, and there's a plethora of different reasons of why having ERGs. And so, when I have come across companies that say, well, why do we have these groups? Why do we have ERGs? Why should we have affinity groups? My question back to them is why not? Having an ERG, having a group like this at your workplace where people feel valued and people can, come together, that can increase productivity, that can increase retention, that can, help with your reputation as a company versus saying, no, we don't want to have any ERGs or any groups like that in the workplace. So I would always say, look at having an ERG, look at having a group similar to an ERG versus saying, no, we don't need one, because in the end, it will help your company. And it does help the morale and boost the productivity of your workers. So, of course, there's some myths about employee resource groups. There's always that pushback. Once again, why have, ERG? I heard negative things about ERGs. Here are some of the myths that I have heard when it comes to ERGs. The first myth, ERGs give some employees special privileges over others. We all know that that's not the case. Myth 2, having special groups for certain employees further exclusion. We know that's not true either. Myth 3, employee networks are social clubs with little impact on the business. Myth 4, ERGs only gather to complain. Myth 5, ERGs can only be created with a focus on race, religion, national gender, or sexual orientation. In one of the first or previous slides, I mentioned, there are tons of non-traditional ERGs or non-traditional groups. I mean, you can take any category and turn it into a group at your place of employment. Myth 6, they hinder inclusion and change from happening because they occur in siloed settings that don't engage voices of power and influence. And then myth 7, they can create a false perception of addressing diversity without real organizational commitment to inclusion. So these are some of the myths that I've heard in my conversations with employers or with friends about, ERGs and similar groups, and they are just myths. I mean, at the end of the day, ERGs, once again, can increase morale and productivity at your place of business. Now, here are some facts about ERGs. Focus is to create diversity and an inclusive workplace. And I said and I bolded and underlined that because I wanted to hit home that ERGs are not just about diversity, it's about creating an inclusive workplace. For those that feel that they're not included and they don't have a voice, to have a voice at their workplace. Groups are employee-led, so it's not leadership, giving orders down to employees. These are employees that are coming together with something in common in creating these groups. ERGs can benefit individuals. I mean, ERGs can provide opportunities for professional development, mentorship, leadership roles, and a sense of community and belonging. ERGs do have an impact on company culture. It can provide a positive impact. Once again, increasing morale, productivity, increasing a sense of belonging, and that leads to retention. That leads to employees wanting to stay because they feel like they're included. They feel like they have a voice within that company. It can align with other company initiatives. So, ERGs can work closely with HR departments and leadership to align, with broader diversity and inclusion strategies. So there might be other strategies that ERGs can work with, can align with, and just to make that company's their program stronger. Potential for advocacy. ERGs can use their collective voice to influence company policies and practices, by addressing issues related to underrepresented groups. And then, an interesting employee engagement, increasing employee engagement and overall job satisfaction, and then helping employers uncover employees with great leadership potential. Once again, going back to providing opportunities for mentoring, for upskilling, for leadership development. These are some facts and some positives about ERGs. So if you attended the February 2024 Workforce Wednesday, you probably have seen this slide before. I think it's very important to talk about allyship. I think one of the myths that was mentioned is basically if I'm not part of that group, I cannot participate or have some type of relationship with that specific ERG. That's not the case. For example, I'm not a veteran, so I will not be able to have, joining a veteran ERG would probably be something that I would not do. However, I can show my support for that group by being an ally. So, this example that I'm giving, with the allyship iceberg, there's a fine line when thinking about allyship for anything, for ERGs, for anything, is that making sure that you are not doing performative, but you're actually doing actual allyship. And so how can you support ERGs? You can set out to learn. You can join groups you identify with. You can support others as an ally. Once again, I'm not a veteran, but I can show my support for that group as being an ally. Just showing up to events, showing up, showing that support, and then validating the importance of ERGs to leadership. Once again, not a veteran, but going to leadership and expressing the importance and the necessity of having a veteran ERG group at the workplace. So those are things that you can do if you're, wanting to be an ally. So what does effective allyship look like? So some other ways that you can be an effective ally and not just a performative ally. Once again, educate yourself. Learn about the challenges faced by the group represented by the ERG through listening, research, and open dialogue with members. Amplify marginalized voices. Publicly support and promote the work of ERG members, giving them a platform to share their perspectives and experiences. Challenging biases and discrimination. Speak up against microaggressions, biased comments, and other discriminatory practices directed towards ERG members. Advocate for change. Using your position and influence to advocate for policies and practices that benefit the group represented by the ERG. Attend ERG events. So show your support by actively participating in events and initiatives organized by the ERG. For example, networking, lunch and learns, things like that. Offer mentorship and sponsorships. Provide career guidance and support to ERG members, helping them to navigate the workplace. And then lastly, be mindful of your role. So don't speak on behalf of the group. Instead, listen to their needs and concerns and ensure that they are heard. So that's what effectively allyship looks like when it comes to ERGs or any other similar groups in the workplace. So when creating an ERG for your company, it's important to first, measure employee interest, securing executive buy-in, define the group's mission, recruit founding members, establish a clear structure with leadership roles, and plan initial activities while ensuring ongoing organizational support and communication channels are in place. Establishing an ERG is easier than you think. I believe, many take the length of time it takes to create an ERG as proof of its difficulty to do so. And as you can see, there's usually six common steps when creating an ERG, and it's not as hard as employers or employees think. ERGs don't have to start with 15, 20 people. If you have an ERG with 2 people, if you have an ERG that starts with 3 people, it's just starting an ERG. So really just surveying, kind of getting a feel of the landscape of your job, figuring out, okay, if enough people are interested or if there's people interested, getting buy-in from leadership, and just going through the steps to create an ERG. And it'll grow. So these are the 6 common steps when it comes to creating an ERG. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and start with the first panel. Once again, I did go through my presentation really quickly because I wanted to spend more time on the panel discussion. And so let me go ahead and introduce our first panel. The topic will be on why ERGs are necessary and essential. So our first panelist is Gabby Ryan. She's a seasoned DEI professional with over a decade of experience in mentorship and sponsorship, employee resource groups, and community outreach. She holds a degree in family studies and psychology from the University of St. Thomas, where she founded their Asian Student Union and advanced DEI efforts within student affairs. As a senior manager of equity and inclusion at Greater Twin Cities United Way, she leads an impactful initiatives by enhancing employee engagement and developing sustainable support systems. Second, we have Rebecca Slabby. I hope I pronounced that correctly. She's a trailblazer leader in equity and inclusion as the executive director of AmazeWorks, where she partners with schools, communities, and organizations to foster classroom and cultures of belonging for both children and adults. Rebecca is also the co-author of 2 amazing work curriculums with a Master of Education from DePaul University and over 15 years of experience teaching middle school humanities and social studies. Her education background informs her work with schools and districts at institutional, state, and regional levels. She also is a cultural competency facilitator for the Minnesota Professional Educators Licensing and Standard Board, PELSB for the acronym, and has taught equity-based pedagogy courses at the University of Minnesota. So thank you, Rebecca. So next we have Perry Charlton. Perry is the co-founder and CEO of Omni Inclusive, a leader in workforce management solutions focused on inclusivity and sustainability. With over 20 years of experience, Perry has crafted impactful talent strategies for major enterprises while championing LGBTQIA 2S plus inclusion. An Air Force veteran, he combines discipline with innovation and staffing. Perry holds a bachelor's in human resource management and a master's in psychology, specializing in gender and sexual fluidity. Omni Inclusive is proudly LGBTBE, SDVBE, DOBE, and carbon neutral and ISO certified. Perry also serves on the board of the Twin Cities Quorum, the Minnesota LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce, supporting LGBTQ plus businesses and community growth. Thank you so much, Perry. Last but not least, we have Muriel Storms. She provides opportunities that develop inclusive leaders who create spaces where everyone can feel valued, driven, productive, innovative, sustaining programming and collaboration. She currently is the VP of Administration for the Minnesota chapter of the National Black MBA Association. And she has worked with several Fortune 500 companies with a broad range of industries, focusing on how to attract and retain top performing talent using diverse methods. And so this includes establishing ERG groups and ERG development strategies. So thank you. Thank you everyone for being a part of this panel. And so with that, I will stop sharing so we could just see us, and then I'll just start with the questions. So the first question is, oh, I believe Muriel is in the audience. So if someone can help Muriel get into the chat, that would be great.
I believe I just moved her as a panelist.
Okay. All right, I'm sorry, hold on. So one of my teammates, either James, if you can help Muriel kind of come up to the front so she can be a part of this discussion. I think she's in the audience. That'd be great.
We'll take care of it. You can go ahead, Adijay.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this one, first question, I'm just going to open it up to the group. Do you think employee resource groups are needed now more than ever? Why or why not? Especially with this climate, we all know, and by everyone's smirk, we all know what I'm talking about. Just the war on DEI, anything that represents DEI. Employee resource groups, similar groups are an extension of DEI. Yeah, do you think that they're needed now more than ever? Why not? And I'll leave it up to anyone who wants to answer first.
I can start. This is Perry. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I mean, ERG groups are definitely needed now more than ever with the rollback of when it comes to inclusion, the Trump executive orders that have come down that kind of has pushed back that D&I, and we've seen companies pull back their D&I methods. I think it's from an employment perspective, it's a scary time, especially if you are identify as an underrepresented person or in one of those groups or an ally. having that place to talk about your authentic whole self and how you bring that to work is a really important thing that needs to continue. So companies that are continuing with those ERGs, or whether they're forming ERGs now, it's really important for employee well-being, productivity. I mean, we could go on and on of all the things that we've seen that prove that having a place where employees can voice what they desire while at the workplace is really beneficial.
I would also add, thanks, Perry. This is Rebecca. I would also add that because we're living in a fairly polarized and divisive world, society, culture, all of that is actually showing up in our workplaces. And so ERGs, particularly for your non-dominant, historically marginalized groups, that people need a safer place in a workplace environment to be able to talk to each other about perhaps some of the biases and microaggressions they're experiencing, a way to learn more about how to support or influence an organization in making change to be more inclusive. And I think those are really important things to remember, is that there's psychological safety that is really important for particularly people of non-dominant, historically marginalized, and more vulnerable groups in society to talk and share how they're experiencing their identities in the workplace, and what they can do to be more seen, heard, valued, and appreciated.
I will also say on the other side of this, especially given the climate that we're in right now, I think ERGs are very important for our external impacts as well. I think about looking for different roles if you're job hunting, really, especially in this climate, given a lot of the professions many of us do, you want to go somewhere that you feel safer. You want to go somewhere that you will feel valued, that you feel like you can bring yourself to work and feel somewhat safe. And so not just for an external reputation standpoint, but just overall community impact, it's so important that you're able to lead those values internally as you represent them externally.
Thank you. So, Rebecca, I wanted to follow up with you. You had mentioned just psychological safety, and I know that that has been, that's been a phrase that's been a focus that's kind of been brought to the forefront. And can you kind of elaborate more, talk more about psychological safety and with ERGs, and just how ERGs can help with that psychological safety? And because it's a newer term, just for the audience, for them, can you kind of explain what psychological safety is, and then go into how ERGs can help with that?
Absolutely. We pull a lot of our work around belonging from neuroscience and how our brains actually work. And when we are experiencing a threat, whether it is perceived or real, whether it is a threat to our physical safety, our mental or emotional well-being, sometimes to our egos even, right? Then our bodies will react in a fight, flight, freeze mode. Right? We call that amygdala hijack. Our brains will get hijacked into a fight, flight, freeze reaction, and we're no longer in our most productive, critical thinking, responsive parts of our brains, our prefrontal cortex. And so, if you have employees who are experiencing bias, or in the workplace, or are worried about their physical, emotional, mental well-being out in the world, because the personal is professional. We are not just, we don't just split ourselves in half when the work day starts and we're like, okay, you're gonna leave all my personal stuff at the door, and I'm gonna not worry about what the news is saying about who gets to be here in our country and who doesn't, and who is seen as in their full humanity and who isn't, right? We don't we don't separate those parts of ourselves. And so if we're showing up in work in perhaps a polarized dynamic in a workplace, or we're experiencing like psychological or threat from outside the world and how we're being influenced, our brains are not fully online and we're not able to do our jobs better. This is why belonging actually has a very key, it is a very key indicator and actually impacts the bottom line of companies, right? It impacts employee turnover and all of those things that because people can't actually think and do their jobs and have healthy relationships with their colleagues or the people they're serving when our brains are offline and we're experiencing bias. And so that's why ERGs help with when people can come together in a psychologically safe place. So like for me, I'm a Korean American adoptee, Asian American. If I were to join a transracial adoptee affinity group or an Asian American affinity group, that would be one aspect of my identity that I don't have to explain, justify, or like I don't have to experience gaslighting perhaps around biases I might be experiencing around that one particular identity. So that's kind of what we mean by psychological safety that ERGs can provide.
So it's almost like, you're able to bring your authentic self at an ERG. You don't have to worry about, one of the previous webinars that I did was on biases, microaggressions, and code switching. And just that code switching, like ERGs can help with, you don't have to code switch. You can be your authentic self. Now, that is subjective. There's even a limit to being your authentic self, but it's not having to code switch. It's being with a group of people that have some similarities with you where you can, like I said, be your authentic self. So before I move on to the next question for Gabby, for Perry, is there any thing you'd like to add to what Miss Rebecca just mentioned? Okay.
She nailed it.
She did. And I like in the comments, she says slavey with the glass. So I was like, okay, I like that. All right. So just almost piggybacking, but not too much. The pushback on DEI efforts, it's just been increasing. And I'm never going to stop saying that because that's just the reality for, today. It's just increasing. We see a lot of, larger companies that have decided to eliminate or really scale back on their DEI efforts. And once again, ERGs are, one of the extensions of a company's DEI efforts. With all of these larger companies or some of these larger companies making announcements of eliminating their programs, it might make smaller companies question if it's worth starting a similar group. The majority of businesses in Minnesota identify as small to medium. So they're not the larger companies. They have, 50 or less or up to 200 and less, employees. What advice would you give to one of those smaller to medium-sized employers on the fence about creating an ERG or a similar group, but then they're seeing what's going on with the larger groups and just like the criticism that, Costco, I'll mention Costco because they decided to continue their DEI initiative. What would you say to those smaller, medium-sized companies that are like, we don't have the bandwidth. We really don't want to go through, that pushback and being kind of put in the spotlight in a negative sense. And that acronym is now being looked at as more negative than positive. Like, what advice would you give to them? And I will, I'll start with Gabby.
Sure. So United Way, we're a little different at Greater Twin Cities United Way. I'm really proud to say that we are able to compensate our ERG co-chairs, which is very, very rare. This is the first place that I've been to where that is something that happens. Like I said, it's very rare, and most of these things are voluntary roles. And so when you look at the return on investment for these employee resource groups, it's only positive. There really is not much investment that companies are putting into it other than giving your employees the time and the space to really bring their best selves to work. So in creating those areas, again, you're making yourself not only a place that people want to be, that people want to work, but you're also making yourself a really great highlight in the community, especially if you are a smaller business. I cannot tell you how many colleagues of mine say, I don't want to shop at Amazon anymore. Where do I shop? I don't want to shop at Target, and so really thinking about the return on investment, not just for your employees and for their well-being at the organization, but also in your community.
So, Carrie?
Yeah, I would add to that, I run a small business myself, and one of the things that is important to look at is capacity. With these large companies, yeah, obviously, as you talked about earlier, there's all these different types of affinity groups and ERGs, but it really weighs on whether you have someone to run the ERGs, and it's almost always, I appreciate that United Way compensates their ERG leaders, but most companies do not. And it's someone who has to do it, as an additional thing with their time. As a small company, you may not have a lot of people that are willing to jump in and take that responsibility. But what I have seen with companies is if they're starting ERGs, even starting just one singular affinity group where all people and allies are created, and as that grows, then you can break them out to different groups, as you get more of a following there. For the companies that go, I just don't have anyone that can run this, or anyone, raising their hand to run it. They want, your employees want resources, but they don't want to be the person responsible for delivering resources. And that's also understandable. As a small company, even doing something small, like, I mean, you think it's small, but it's big, providing resources, providing a list of resources, whether it's mental health, medical, affinity group resources, providing that capability for your employees to find that piece maybe outside your company or connected with your company. Most small to medium sized employers can usually find access to like workplace perks groups that will have things that help kind of improve that daily life of your worker. And you build from there. I think the hardest thing when it comes to bringing in, D&I strategy into a company, ERG focus into a company, people start with that analysis paralysis where they don't know where to start, so they'll start nothing. Because they go, well, what if I started in the wrong spot? There's not a wrong spot to start when it comes to inclusion. It's about hearing the feedback from your workforce and putting in measures with them, not at them. Work together. What do they need right now? And start there. That's always the thing that I tell companies is you got to pick a starting point. If you're gonna work on looking at EEO data, let's start there. If you're gonna work on looking at supplier diversity, let's start there. If you're looking at ERG, you can't go wrong with picking somewhere and then building from that. It's not a perfect science. It's not like creating or implementing a system or a tool or a finance process. This is human life, socialization, and hundreds of years of workplace stigma and discrimination. So it's not a perfect science.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Well, I see that Mariel has her camera on. Are you able to unmute yourself
Yeah.
and join us?
All right. Miracle of miracles.
Okay, so, and can someone spotlight Mariel? Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
James,
is your
Gabby,
camera?
all of you helping out. Thank you so very much. I still can't access the chat, but here I am.
Okay.
So I've been listening in as well. And really, Perry, you said it incredibly well as far as the start small. And actually, I would add in, even if you're a big organization, still start small. And the reason why is burnout for ERG members and leadership is 100% real. And when you overindulge and want to do everything possible and you're going to make a huge difference, yes, you are, but start small so that you continue to have good physical, mental well-being, continue to do your day job, and also have this passion on the side, which is still a win-win for businesses. That's what I would add.
Can I say something a little bit to what you were
Yeah.
saying about pushback?
Yes.
I think the question that companies really need to ask themselves in organizations is of all sizes is pushback from whom? The loudest voices do not necessarily mean the majority, right? And that there might be some people who are anti-DEI or anti-ERGs that are very vocal, but it doesn't mean that rolling back all of your DEI initiatives or not being willing to respond to the needs of your employees who are BIPOC or LGBTQ or neurodiverse or veterans or any of these other groups. It doesn't mean responding to them is going to break your company or break your organization because of a few very anti DEI loud voices. And so I think that's just a really important question. Pushback from whom and why is because we're too reactive right now and we're not actually seeing an organization as a whole and who all of our employees are, right? So you might roll back your DEI stuff to please one group of people. And if you're an organization, maybe those are donors with, big pockets, or maybe those are some big clients. And the scary part of that, though, is there will be other people will fill in the space, fill in the people who are about seeing each other's humanity, about wanting to be inclusive. Like, they will come in to make up that gap. We just don't believe that, and we're reactive and scared. So
Well, yeah, I like, and just I mean, just well said. This panel is going better than, well, I already knew it was going to be great, but it's just going better than I expected. So I'm definitely excited for the second panel. But Perry, I really wanted to just reiterate what you said, or repeat what you said about starting small. And I think that goes back to just, especially for those smaller companies, it's just starting small. So a company that has, 50 employees, they don't have to think that they have to start an ERG the same way that maybe a company that has 5,000 employees have it. You're just starting small. If there's a need there, if there's leadership from buy-in from leadership, and as Rebecca mentioned, yes, you might get some pushback. You might get some people, with any type of changes, you're going to get some pushback. I think it just really kind of it supports the thought that ERGs are something that any company, regardless of size, regardless of industry, if they're considering it, if they're interested, if they want to have an ERG or an affinity group or any group like that in the workplace, it can be done. Like I said, it doesn't have to start with 500 people. It could start with 2, and it can grow from that. But if there's a need for that, then employers should support employees that want to build those type of groups in their workplace. And going back to what I said earlier, it's going to lead to increase in productivity. It's going to lead to retaining and employees feeling included in that sense of belonging, which is very important, especially for retaining your workforce, which all employers want to do. So thank you for mentioning that, and that's one of the key takeaways. Start small. That's just it. 2 words, start small.
And if I can add to that real quick
Yeah.
before I know our panel is about to we're shifting to the next one. As a as a board member for Quorum, so we're looking heavily at how we can support the LGBTQ business network, and I mean, that obviously includes the trans and non-binary network as well. In the past, well, at least in the past year, and we're seeing more. We are seeing an influx of people who are relocating to Minnesota to seek care, to seek asylum. And at Quorum, we're actually working on creating a relocation guide for those who are seeking support, whether they're trans, non-binary, they have trans children. And that includes, I mean, we're bringing in individuals who are in the community who are seeking work. We are bringing in parents of children of the community who are seeking work. So for mid-sized to small companies to any size company, if you're looking to grow your talent base, there's a lot of talent coming to Minnesota right now. And the one thing that they are looking for is what companies are safe for me to work at, and what companies will provide the care that I need for my family to work at. If you're not putting those programs in place and advertising that you have those goals and you commit to those values, you're going to miss out on a lot of skilled labor.
And so I know that what we do on our webpage is that we do include contact information for all the panelists. So I will, ask if it's okay for people in the audience that have questions to reach out to you. I know for Gabby, there is someone in the audience that had mentioned that they compensate their ERGs as well. They'd love to hear more about your model. Gerald Green, so just if it's okay for him to maybe email you to say, hey, I listened to the
please connect
webinar.
with me.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, please.
All right. So yeah, oh, go ahead.
Yes,
Mariel?
Mariel,
Yeah,
I wanted
Mariel,
to
sorry.
add one more thing along the lines of where do you start, and just wanted to add in about the metrics. And this is so important about the climate that we're in right now. But guess what? A lot of us have already been doing this already. Is how do you measure success of an ERG or whatever affinity group that you start? Always have it tied to business impact. And I think that no matter what pushback comes, when you tie it to economics, when you tie it to financial well-being, all of you have said how it builds, the employees' retention. It can attract talent. It can attract talent from outside of Minnesota. Come on into Minnesota is what I say, because if we can create this flow and this kind of win-win for everybody, and then we measure it saying, well, see, we said the ERGs are beneficial because now we have a survey, both qualitative and quantitative, that says they're going to stay. Here's the data of how many people actually stayed because of these ERGs. Look at how many people we were able to attract. And oh, by the way, look at all of them talking about our organizations, in social media. Again, the talent is there. So how do you attract the talent? And I think that ERG, and clients, I forgot as well. Business clients want to come to your business. They want to say, I'm not seeing it somewhere else. Where else? So it's about that business mindset. So whenever you start, make sure that you have metrics to prove that it's working. And it also helps you if you need to pivot how you do work as well. So I wanted to add that in, again, no matter what size company you're at or organization.
Thank you. And then for those in the audience that are providing like links to resources, we will try to add those and include those in the resource list too when we upload this information to our webpage. So if there's any links or resources that you feel aligns with today's topic, feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll hopefully we can capture it and add it to the list of resources when we upload it to our Workforce Wednesday webpage. So, all right, so just one more question, and this is for everyone. And before I do that, I just want to say again, thank you so much. This has been just outstanding and amazing. I appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedules to be a part of this panel. You know, I mean, it's something that we kind of talked about already, but I'll just end it with this. In addition to what we talked about, you know, what should a business know and consider before starting an ERG at their company or an affinity group? Like anything else that we didn't mention that you would recommend for an employer? And this is regardless of size.
I would say the big thing is to make sure that you have key leadership sponsorship of those ERGs. So it's one thing to have an ERG where you have affinity groups and folks can come together, they can meet, they can share their concerns, they can talk about how to support each other. But where is that voice getting back up to leadership? So making sure that you always have leadership sponsors. In most companies that I worked when I ran and were part of ERGs, there was always an executive level individual that sponsored that affinity group. And that was our key voice. We could provide our feedback to say, this is what we're looking for, and they can go and make sure that those measures are put into place or at least considered, I guess. But yeah, making sure that there is a voice back to leadership from those affinity groups.
For
Anybody
me,
else?
for me, I would say also it's really important that ERG groups have a clear charge or charter or purpose, because you know, and you had mentioned this in your slideshow, is just like having a safe and supported space to share about some of the challenges that you're experiencing because of that particular identity is important. And it can't just be an echo chamber of negativity. And so, what's the charge? What's the purpose? For some ERGs, it's like the purpose is to put on some sort of educational activity for where the rest of the organization can learn about that particular identity or lived experience. That's great, but we also have to make time and space for employees to actually do that, because otherwise it's just extra work. But if you don't have a charge and the ERG group wants to actually recommend important changes to policy, procedure, practice, but they don't actually have, as Perry said, like an executive sponsor, or they don't have any power to do that, then actually it's just more of an exercise in frustration. And it can lead to actually turnover because, hey, you say we can meet and share, but and recommend, but you're not giving us any power to do that. So I think having a charter, a mission, purpose, and executive sponsorship. So ERGs are clear on what they are and not what they can and cannot actually do with an organization or for an organization.
Adeshaywa, I have a couple questions from the audience. I know we got a great
yeah.
panel coming up.
Actually, let me see if Gabby and Mariel, is there anything that you guys want to add to this before we go to some questions from the audience?
Nothing from me, but I do have a hard stop at noon, so I have
Okay.
to jump. But please feel free to connect with me or reach out if you have any direct questions for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Gabby. All of this is amazing information, so I hope the audience is taking notes. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to be on the panel, because I've made so many mistakes and learned a lot in my 10 plus years, you know, either leading or sponsoring. The other thing I would add on top of the executive sponsor, that clear vision and purpose, is understanding your resources. You know, knowing that what can I do right now, and also utilizing external resources as well. So there are nonprofits and organizations that are doing the work as far as professional development. Sometimes you have a smaller organization, or maybe you just don't have the experts inside, and utilizing those external organizations can also help supplement any type of programming that you do internally. So bringing in external speakers that will focus on a topic is always helpful. Most of the time, the speakers do require some cash flow. That's why you need that executive sponsor. But I always say that you can figure things out in a creative way. I've led ERGs, BRGs, etc., with $0, with lots of dollars. All of the above can be done so long as it's thought out. It's tied to that purpose and strategy every year, and then always make sure that you're agile to pivot as necessary.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, now I'm going to pass this along to James, who has a few questions from the audience, I think pertaining to this first panel discussion, and then we'll go ahead and get started on the second. So James, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll go through this. We have 2 questions from the audience we'd like to ask this panel before we jump over, if that works for everybody. And so just piggybacking on what we've said already, Griselle Martinez from the audience, I'm going to direct this towards, let's direct this towards Perry. And thank Perry, I saw online, thank you for your service, by the way. But the question is talking about investments, right? We've talked about investments, we've talked about executive sponsorships and connections. If you're in an organization where maybe there's less than, you're looking for more executive investment and ownership, how do you create that? Is there a way to create that? What do you do?
More executive investment and ownership. You know, the thing that I've talked with a few other colleagues in the past couple of years, I'll be honest with you, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but you know, prior to the current administration, there was a push for making D&I goals part of performance review. So where a company has, you know, as most mid-sized to large companies, you have your annual goals. Those flow down by department. They flow from department to individual. Why is there not an opportunity there for managers to be measured? What have you done to contribute to inclusion to the company? Whether you sponsor an ERG, you're volunteering, you're mentoring individual, like there are options that you can put into that, but tie that to performance goals, which ties to merit. That, you know, that is, and I know people go, oh, that sounds so gross to tie things to merit, but how do we get anybody to do anything without, we are I mean, if just brush off your copy of Freakonomics and look at, you know, how are we motivated as a society? We're motivated by reward. And so the idea should be that do it because it's the right thing to do, but we are still struggling with that shift. 2023, there was a Yale University review research project where they looked at all Fortune 500 companies and looked at determining whether they had D&I programs, and if they had D&I programs because of business case, meaning it's good for business, or justice case, meaning it's the right thing to do. And of that of the Fortune 500, and this again is like a year and a half ago, it's only about 92% have programs. So some of them don't even have D&I mentioned. And of those that have it for it's the right thing to do, 6%. 6% of Fortune 500 companies, which is a very small number, do it because it's the right thing to do. Everybody else does it because they know it'll make them money. And when they surveyed employees and people looking for jobs at that time, it was the shift. What do you want to see from a business? They overwhelmingly, 82%, wanted to see my company does it because it's the right thing to do. So we are in an imbalance between what employees want and what businesses think they should be doing.
Yeah, I don't want to badmouth any CFOs or controllers, but from my own experience, you know, they're the ones who keep those, you know, is this redundant? Is this, you know, is this superfluous to our business goals and our mission and our where we want to be, so on and so forth. But I love that you mentioned that compensation idea. Director Miller, you might know Jessica Miller, she talked about organizations that have bonus structures for their managers attached to retention. I can't remember how they structured that, but of course that brings into the whole diversity, equity, inclusion thing where you want to make them feel comfortable, like they're part of the family and so forth. So I'm going to throw this next question out to Rebecca, because what we're talking about here really is developing a culture, and that culture comes from management. This is a question from Sarah Hill in the audience, and she wants to know, how do organizations and ERGs interact to impact culture? What does that interaction look like?
Great question. I think again, that goes back to the mission or the purpose, the charge of the ERG. And is it that the ERG is expected to, again, like I worked with a big government institution that their ERGs were exhausted and burnt out, as Mariel said, because they were expected to put on one big education event about their particular identity group, and nobody wanted to be in the ERG because it was exhausting and also tokenizing and all of those kind of things. I think there shouldn't there to the point of a psychologically safer space is not to make sure that that group doesn't have to prove themselves. And so when we ask groups to report back, to do an event or some educational opportunity or something, we're putting terms on that support system, which is not healthy and not conducive to actually creating belonging for that particular group. And so the interaction, I think, can be more interpersonal with colleagues around curiosity or just that allyship, or, of I support that you are all meeting and I don't need to know exactly what you're talking about. And I think it's great that you have this space, and that can be the expectation. And if you are going to have ERGs do, an educational event, then give them time, give them resources, and take something off their plate so that they can do that, because it's an additional part of their job.
That was beautifully said. Mariel, I look at you to comment. We are really running out of time, so I want to make sure I get it in there. But I'm going to be reaching out personally to talk to you about self-ID campaigns, and maybe I'll find some way to share that with the audience. As you know, someone who works with Native Americans, the whole blood quantum thing, it seems very timely that that's something that you focus on. But let's save that for another time. What were you going to comment on?
Actually, I have two comments. One that Perry was mentioning. You can do both. It's good for business and it's the right thing to do. And I think we all have mentioned that, but I'm just going to reiterate that. And when you want to get more people involved as allies at the top of the house or maybe in the middle of the house, it's really about understanding their needs and saying, hey, just thinking as an entrepreneur, what do you really need? Well, we're really struggling with hiring XYZ and our turnover is high. I have an idea. Let me help you. And here's an ERG, by the way. Let's work together. We're a group. Our goal is to support the organization. And then to Rebecca's point, I forgot to mention, but you just mentioned it as well, tools. Again, I cannot stress enough, the burnout is very high. These are volunteers. When you provide them, I keep on going back to the metrics in the survey, provide them a template of how to measure, a standard template so that everyone's collecting the same information again, qualitative, quantitative. Do I want to stay at the company? Do I feel empowered? Am I using what I learned for my career growth within the organization? And then also giving them like the template even to start their charter. It changes everything. And I, again, learned that from some amazing organizations that I worked for, where they had the template and it was so much easier when I had that. So if you are growing or starting an ERG, think about those templates and of course utilize all of us. There's tons of us in Minnesota that have been there, done that, and we have those templates and we can help you.
Thank you. Thank you. And sorry for going a little bit late, folks. Sorry, Adeshewa. but I know we have a great panel coming up. So thanks for allowing us to ask those questions.
That is okay. And now we'll just have a few seconds to pull up the second group of panelists. All right, so everyone, this is our second panel. So in this panel, we'll be talking about best practices for implementing and sustaining employee resource groups at your organization. Like the first panel, we have some amazing panelists, so I will quickly just go over and introduce each of them. First, we have Dwight Toll, who is the Training and Safety Coordinator for the Wafer Maintenance Department for Seagate Technologies. He also serves on their EH&S Site Safety Committee for its Normandale campus and takes part in internal and external audits for the department and site. He serves as the president for the Seagate Professionals of Color Employee Resource Group. He grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and his hobbies include bowling, love for cars, and any Wisconsin sports team. We won't hold that against you. He has obtained 2 advanced degrees in AAS and electronic engineering technology from ITT Technical Institute and an AAS in computer programming and accounting from MBTI, Milwaukee Business Technology Institute. He has been an employee with Seagate since 1996. So welcome, Dwight, and thank you for being on this panel. Sean McMore was born and raised in South Minneapolis and attended the University of Northern Iowa as a psychology major and minored in coaching. Then furthered his education by attending Concordia University, St. Paul, and received a master's degree in educational leadership and administration. He worked primarily in the education system, but had stops in college football coaching and the private sectors of mental health. He came to the Minnesota Department of Human Services as an equity director for the Behavioral Health, Housing, and Deaf and Hard of Hearing Administration, BHDH as an acronym, in June of 2023, and has been in the Diversity Recruitment and Retention Supervisor role since January of 2024, so a little over a year. Happy anniversary for that, Sean. In his free time, he likes to golf, hang out with family and friends, travel, read, gaming, watch a good movie and a show. I guess we have a lot in common on that. And then he also stays active in the football communities during the fall. And so he currently resides with his wife and son in Eagan, Minnesota. So Sean, thank you very much for being on this panel. Now, I want to make sure that I pronounce this correctly. Zoe Miller-Liley is the vice chair of the state of Minnesota's Inclusive ERG and the co-chair of MnDOT's Q&A ERG. A lawyer with MnDOT's Office of Land Management, she graduated from the University of Minnesota School of Law, having previously attended the University of Southern California and the University of Queensland. Zoe is an out and proud transgender woman who lives in Minneapolis with her wife and 3 cats. In her free time, she cooks for friends and loved ones and restores classic cars. Zoe, we're gonna need to talk about the cooking. I love to eat, you love to cook. Let's connect. All right, last but not least, we have Cassidy Gardenier. She is a racial equity and anti-racism practitioner and is currently the Equity and Inclusion Officer at UCare. She joined UCare in May of 2022 as a member of the newly formed Equity and Inclusion Department. In her role, they provide leadership and vision to UCare's diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism work with a focus on capacity building, both at the individual and the organizational level, including oversight and direction to its 7 ERGs. So Cassidy, you have a lot on your plate, 7 ERGs that you overlook. That is great. Prior to joining UCare, she spent a decade at the City of Minneapolis in various roles, including as director of the Civil Rights Equity Division, where they worked at the intersection of civil rights law and racial equity. She holds a Master of Public Policy from the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs and a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Acting from the University of Montana. Wow. Great. So this is just a great group of second panelists. Like the first panelist, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be a part of this discussion. So I will go ahead and now stop sharing so we could just do the spotlight. And then I will start with my first question. This first question is directed to the group. We talked about in the first panel, we kind of talked about, why ERGs are necessary and essential, and, for companies wanting to start ERGs, things that, they should consider, like buy-in from leadership, and you don't have to, like, as Perry had mentioned, start small. I love that. Just start small. That's going to be, when I talk about ERGs, that's going to be the new phrase I start throwing around. Well, now let's say we are past the point of creating an ERG and now we actually have an ERG. Maintaining momentum is important to continuing ERGs or any type of groups. For moving forward, we'll just say ERGs, but we mean, any other similar groups. How can these groups retain employee and leadership participation? So, it might be easy to start one, but then I think the challenge is maintaining an ERG and keeping, that the value of that ERG for that company. How can groups maintain and continue to keep that importance in leadership's eyes of why that ERG group should be in existence at the company? And I'll open it up to anyone to answer.
Yeah, hello everybody. Good to see everybody on the call. Thank you for that warm welcome there. I appreciate it. And I'm sure everybody else can add to this, but I would say how we do it here at the Department of Human Services, just to keep people engaged and making sure we have the buy-in at the leadership level, is one, once we started our ERGs, whether it's we have it at different levels. So we have sponsors. So we have people that are sponsors, and our sponsors are the people that are responsible to be connecting with like the leadership and making sure they still have that engagement and participation in it. So it's about how we structure the ERG from the get-go. And we have it with members, so anybody can join, whether it's an employee or a community members as well. So the community can be a part of our ERGs as well. And then we have our sponsors, who are the people that oversee all of the funding for our ERGs, works with our leadership and making sure that we have that buy-in and things like that. And we also have like managers who oversee the ERG, like who's the one that coordinate it. And that helps people really get like that leadership development skills. Say if they're a rep one or they're looking to try to progress their skills, this is an opportunity for them to get leadership opportunities on running meetings and creating agendas and things like that to help them lean in and on their developmental skills too. And I would say the best way that we've been able to keep just people engaged and wanting to be a part of it is having our ERGs and all of the sponsors and the leaders that's running the ERGs come together and put together a charter. And when we put together a charter, it's pretty much putting the focus on like, why are we meeting as a team? What do we want to accomplish? And what are the focuses we want to have each month? So we map out our agenda pretty much, or topics that we'd be able to want to talk about each month. So our topic for this month is Black History Month. Next month within our ERGs, it would be, I know there's a couple, but it'll be folk on like International Women's Day or things that's going on in the month. And then we bring it there during the ERGs and have conversations and talk about it. And another thing that we do is open it up to community, or just the members that's participating in the ERG, to be able to give feedback on some of the direction that they would like to see the ERG go into. And that helps by, that helps us get that buy-in from participants to make sure that they feel that their voices are heard and that we're headed in the right direction that they feel best fit for the ERG. So that's kind of just a quick snapshot of how we do it here at DHS, but I want to, and I know we're running up low on time. I want to give other people some time to talk, but yeah, that's kind of how we kind of try to keep that participation in leadership and people engaged at the just membership level.
I just have a couple thoughts, because I would say that once you have an ERG that's, started, I would say sort of in this moment, you have pressures that are going to come sort of from within and pressures that are sort of going to come sort of from outside of the organization. So I'd say within the organization, as alluded to before, burnout is very real. I took over from the prior ERG leader because she was just burnt out by the situation in the world. So making sure that there's continuity of leadership is important because turnover can impact how people are going to respond. I would say other ones are going to be that people not seeing the results of what they're doing. So having a meeting but not really seeing that reflected. And this kind of ties into sort of the pressures from without. So you've got, maybe the sort of external pressure of, do we really need these groups? Or you have, stakeholders in an agency saying, do we really need this? And I mean, the business case for an ERG is the same, and it's perhaps even higher now. Being able to retain, being able to train and grow your current employees, those are all advantages that an ERG offers. And having an ERG attracted me to working with the state. So I would say that, it's important to, if you want an ERG to continue, if you're in a ERG role, make sure that you have a deep bench. Make sure that you're pulling in a lot of people to sort of take smaller roles, so that way, if there is burnout, people can step up. And if you're sort of in an overseeing role or trying to get one started, get that buy-in and make it not about, make that business case, because that business case is going to be even stronger now.
I think I want to jump in as far as for what we do here. We kind of go in three folds. You have the employees here, and so trying to keep the morale up. We do community engagement, so trying to teach high schoolers about STEM, because we're a hard drive company. And then we also try to recruit new college grad hires, and we try to get like the best of like engineering departments, stuff like that. So as we work on those three different facets within our ERGs, the sponsorship is very important. Getting the buy-in from so we need talent acquisitions because they go to the universities as they're doing the recruiting. The community outreach work that we do, it's been great for us to get different allies to volunteer and present, um, demonstrate different stuff when we're presenting to the high school kids and stuff like that. And then for the on-site part here, where we're trying to keep our morale up and just show the differences and to have people be a part of what we do, that's where we struggle because we're always trying to, we have work to do, and so our production, but and so then we can't take away from that. But then getting the buy-in, the buy time, we only have a limited amount of time to do that. And so it's just, you have to run a fine line of making sure that don't ruffle a lot of feathers when we do that.
Cassidy, was there anything that you wanted to add?
No, we can move on. I think that they really covered it.
So, there was two things from everyone's answers that I got that I kind of want to talk a little bit more about. One, it seems that one of the strategies for an ERG to maintain just in its existence and to maintain a positive or increases momentum or just the value of it, it seems to be with those external relationships. So working with your I was going to say your talent acquisition, sorry, going out to the colleges or Sean, you had mentioned, for some special events, really engaging with the community. So it seems that, going outside of and building those relationships, not only with employees within the company, but with, equally or organizations that kind of align with your group outside of the company can help with maintaining, an ERG within the company. The second one, and Zoe, you had mentioned it, is burnout, and ERG burnout is real. Like everything else, that burnout is real. And so I would say, I guess my question to you, Zoe, would be, just to kind of elaborate and talk a little bit more about the burnout is, what are some other things that people can do to combat burnout? If they see that they're coming to that burnout, because the last thing anyone wants to do is to really start, a really good, strong group or a group like an ERG or an affinity group or whatever you decide to call it, and then have to stop because everyone is burnt out. And so the burnout could be because of any pushback. The burnout could be maybe starting too much at once. Once again, going back to what Perry said in the first panel, starting small, and then growing from there. So yeah, I guess I would open that up to then the group and not just to you, Zoe, is just talk a little bit more about the burnout and what people can do to kind of avoid that.
Sure. It's tough. I would say that there are a number of factors that trans employees in particular are facing, and they're as an individual, like the extent of what I can do is a lot of just trying to be it's mindfulness stuff. It's sort of the lower level, take it one day at a time, positive attitude sort of things. That's not going to be enough. And this is one of where it comes to the importance of allies who are willing to listen, who are willing to advocate and take on roles when requested. Things like that are going to be valuable, I would say. And also just having signs from leadership that, the work is valued and the work is valuable. So beyond those two ideas, I think I would just say that if you find yourself in a place where you're thinking that you might start to be burnt out, delegating and uplifting other people. The former coach, the former chair who stepped down, still is in an advisory role, but I've taken over a lot from her. So that's, I think, where a lot of it comes from, because a lot of it is just really big issues that the individual I can't fix the problem. I can fix, but I can think about what my personal emotional reaction is going to be.
Thank you. Cassidy?
Yeah, so I would just add, so UCARE, at UCARE, our ERGs are relatively new. So we're under a year in starting up. So we have the benefit of the newness, but being very keenly aware that burnout is real and that we don't want departments kind of skirting their responsibilities and relying only on ERGs to celebrate Black History Month or to put everything on on those groups instead of everyone playing a role. So in order to kind of set folks up for success, there's a couple of things that we've tried to do in the beginning. Is each of our ERGs have a specific business purpose. And so really making sure that all the requests that come in, all the activities, that in this new excitement of wanting to do it all, that there is a lens by which they can say and pick and choose the things that are going to move us in a direction from just transactional one-offs to more transformational opportunities, so that at the end we can say, here's the totality of your work that really pushed the professional development of your group or pushed our community outreach of this group. Sometimes I'm the naysayer because I try to remind folks that we're only 7 months in and we need to sustain the enthusiasm. But that's one tool, is coming back to their work plans, coming back to their business purpose. The other thing is again, in that enthusiasm, making sure that our leaders are picking the what, the direction, the vision that they see, but then really engaging their members and the rest of the organization in the how things get done, making sure that if the way that they want to celebrate things or educate things are done in a way that other people are excited about taking on some of those activities and leadership, that it's not just on our presidents and our co-chairs to be doing everything. And then the final thing that I'll say is really, we've worked really intentionally to connect our ERG leaders with one another. There is an opportunity to do a lot of double dipping. So making sure that, for example, we don't have any race or ethnic specific groups. We have a multicultural group. And so making sure that for Black History Month, our women's ERG is connected to our multicultural ERG so that we can lift up Black women during either Black History Month or during Women's History Month. Making sure that our caregivers ERG is connected with our generations caregiving, so that if they do a session with our Human Resources Department to learn about what benefits are available, we're double dipping. And so our ERGs are able to rely on each other for administrative support, for attendance, for garnering excitement there, and then for support. These groups are really new in what they're doing. And so sharing surveys, sharing measurements, sharing events and platforms. And the other kind of benefit of sharing that burden of the doing and getting things off the ground is that it kind of goes into one of the things that I don't know that we're going to have time to touch on, but is because we don't have really specific ERGs, the cross ERG opportunities allow for individuals with multiple identities to not have to pick and choose just one group. And so they're able to meet with people that have the same identities, that share multiple identities without having to go to 2 meetings a month, without having to join every ERG. And so that's hopefully both garnering excitement, but also minimizing the chances that folks have burnout down the road.
All right. Well, thank you. And guess what? We are at time. I know. We can go forever. And this has been really good. What this tells me is that we probably, not this year because we already have our schedule for this year, but definitely in the future have an additional conversation about this. And so just really quickly, some takeaways, and then I'll have my counterpart, Della, talk about next month's Workforce Wednesday. So here are the takeaways. Buy-in from leadership is crucial. What we talked about, which is not on here, burnout is real. Starting small so you don't have to start big. Once again, that's something else that's not on here. There are always opportunities for allyship, so you don't have to actually be a part of that group, but you can be an ally for that group. And there are multiple resources available. So one of the resources, and we'll have this in the when we send out the information, there is a strategic ERG summit that's happening July 22nd to 23rd and September 25th to 26th. We'll include the link. I found this when doing some research. It's going to be here in the Twin Cities. So I will send that out. So anyone that wants to go or have representatives from their company attend, please do. And then this is just some information about a diversity and inclusion competitive grants. You can find this on our webpage. We'll also include this information when we upload it to our website and when we send this out to the audience. So with that, I will pass it along to my counterpart, Della Ludwig, who will talk about next month's Workforce Wednesday.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Congratulations, everybody. That was a great panel discussion, both phase 1 and phase 2. So congratulations. Just wanted to talk about next month on March 5th. Did you know more than 100,000 Minnesotans are currently under some form of community supervision, and approximately 1,000 individuals are expected to return to their communities from prison this year. At the same time, employers in Minnesota are facing increasing challenges in meeting the workforce demands of the future. This creates a complex dynamic for our employers, as growing numbers of job seekers with criminal records are actively looking for employment opportunities across the state. Join us next month on March 5th to learn about the legal compliance and minimizing risks of those with criminal backgrounds and successful hiring strategies and the rewards of hiring fair chance workers. Again, that is on March 5th. Registration is now available. We'll pop that in there for you. And then we'll also have for you to go ahead and fill out our survey. Please complete the survey. This is how we figure out what we're going to be presenting on, as well as the feedback helps us be able to plan accordingly for our presenters. So feel free to contact us. We each represent a part of the state. We did a little jogging around just recently, so you'll see our new state map, and feel free to reach out to us with any questions that you may have. Any questions, just reach out to us and we will get back to you. Thank you so much, and we will see you soon.
Right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your month, and we'll see you next month.